No.
All right. Today we're going to be talking about angles. Angles is possibly the second most important concept in Overwatch, other than space, and angles are conveniently the most important way to control space, which kind of fits. Um, to start with, just defining what an angle is kind of useful. So, angle, as like the broad definition, is just any position that is separate from the rest of your team. So right now, a really simple example is that Wes here on run, he's playing on this right side. The rest of the team's on the left side. He is taking an angle here. Pretty simple. Um, and the reason why this like means anything at all is that for the enemy team here, if somebody's playing on an angle like this, they would have to choose to either look at this left side angle and see that, or look at the right side angle and see this. They just have to look somewhere else, right? Um, and then angles tend to be things like left, or I didn't say left move right. Tend to be like right or like left or like main. That kind of tends to be how angles are defined, but they're not always that way. Sometimes it's like above, sometimes it's like behind, but generally it's like a left, right, and kind of middle angle, kind of like how the lanes in a MOBA work, but not quite like that. A lot less rigid than that. So I think most people probably know what an angle is. That's not any new territory for anybody. But are there any questions about just what an angle is right now?
The other thing I'll ask is flanking and angles kind of the same, like a synonym, or would you differentiate those?
That depends on the person. I would say that flanking is different. Flanking refers to deep angles. So like pressuring here, this would be a flank because you're on a deep angle onto the back line. Whereas like right here, like this is an angle, but it's not really a flank per se. Or like this is an angle right now, but it's not really a flank per se. Wes might
Okay.
turn it into a flank where he might get to here and start pressuring the back line, but it's currently just an angle. You can say
Okay.
that a flank is like a type of deep angle.
Okay.
Um, but all right, I think we'll move on to the more important start stuff, which is why should I take angles? So controlling angles, like I said earlier, is critical for controlling space, which is the most important thing in all of Overwatch. If you don't control the angles, it's almost impossible to control space, at least in 5v5 Overwatch. In 6v6 Overwatch, the game is a little bit different. People like to clump up a little bit more. And so back in those days, you could kind of get away with just stacking every single person on one angle and making it like a death ball. But nowadays, it's a bit different, and controlling angles is so key to controlling space, and controlling space is so key to winning games. So if West wasn't here on the right side, the enemy team would just get to walk through on the right side, and we would probably get punished pretty hard for that. Um, Aside from controlling space, which I'm not going to talk about in too much detail because I already have a whole other lecture about that. If anyone hasn't seen the space lecture, please watch that. That one's so important. But aside from controlling space, angles do provide you with other benefits too. And one of them is safety, believe it or not. Some people might think of safety as well as safety in numbers. Next to my teammates, I'm safe. They can heal me, they give me a shield and everything. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it is true, but in an ideal world, actually, you would organize with your teammates to make those angles a safe space for you as well. Um, but why an angle provides you safety? There's a few reasons. One is that AoE damage can't hit two different places at once, obviously. So what's an example of an AoE ability in this team? Um, we don't really have too much examples here, but like a good example would be like a Junkrat tire, right? So yeah, if Junk wants to tire people here, right? He wants to tire a group of people here, bang. Well, he's not going to be able to hit you, right? Kind of simple there. But yeah, being in a different position means AoE damage is less effective because it can't hit you if you're not with the bulk of your team. And as a whole team, if people aren't all stacking one place, well, you can really nullify the effect of AoE characters. Another thing is, and kind of the bigger one, the more universal thing, is if you're on an angle and you are dove, you have a safe retreat path, which is back to your team. When you do that, those divers who jumped at you, they use their cooldowns to get to you where you were, but now you're somewhere else, right? So let's replace on run here, this position. Let's say this on run isn't an on run actually, and instead she's a widow, right? This is a widowmaker here. And then the enemy team goes, oh my gosh, there's a widow here. We want to kill the widow. They jump at widow, but then she uses her grapple. She gets out to the rest of the team over here. They burnt all their cooldowns to get to the widow here. She ran away. She's safe with her team. She's going to get healed up. They don't have cooldowns to chase her. Widow got away to safety because she started on the angle and then dropped back to her teammates. Um, if you already with your team though, and they jumped on you, you could try to run away, but you're not running away to safety. You're running away from your team further into danger. And so having the angle gives you like the extra step of like the ability to drop back. This is really important if you play Kiriko especially, or Mercy sometimes too in a way, because those characters' mobility relies on running to their teammates. And so if you're already with all your teammates, you have nowhere to run. Both other characters is a little bit different, but kind of the same still. Another benefit that angles provide you is that they deny the effectiveness of cover. And I'm going to let this play out a little bit longer because I'm sure we're going to see a good example of it. We kind of are already, but we will in just a second, I bet.
Flashpoint unlocks in 10
Right now.
seconds.
So this brig has a great source of cover to the main part of the team over here. There's no way that these guys could see her, but the Onron can, because most sources of cover can only block damage from one angle, right? This wall is great at denying everything like over like here, but anything that's not in that area is going to still have line of sight to the brig and still be able to shoot her. And so by taking an angle, a person who was playing completely safe behind cover can now be exposed, and that person's going to have to choose which angle they want to be seen by, right? This brig, if she's scared of the on run, she could run over up to here. The on run can't see her anymore, but now these guys can see her. She could technically move right here and be safe from both sides because she was able to conveniently find a piece of cover that does block both the angles, partly because this angle is fairly shallow though, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But in general, most sources of cover aren't going to be good enough to be able to block multiple angles, just one at a time. Another benefit that angles give you is setting up on an angle can force the enemy team to make a lose-lose decision. This is super important. They can either choose to pressure you and expose their backline to the rest of the team, or pressure the rest of your team and expose their backline to you. And we'll probably see an example of that in this fight here, so I'm going to let it play out. So my team's going to make a choice, and either choice is unfortunate for them. All right. They choose to pressure the bulk of the team over here, and now the Onron is going to get a free access into the backline.
Flashpoint unlocked.
They let the Onron waltz right into their territory. Now, of course, they have counterplay with the Cassidy, but still, this is pretty dangerous. And if you were like, say, a tank here, right? If the tank's set up on the angle, that's a really difficult choice for the team to make. Because letting a tank into the back line isn't so simple. If it's just an on run, sure, you can throw a flashbang, she has to run away. If it's a tank, you're going to need to allocate a lot of resources to evict that once it's already a problem. So by setting up on an angle, you create these lose-lose scenarios where every team has to either push, either accept to allow you into the backline for free, or allow the rest of the team into the backline for free. And both options suck. Um, this is also like less relevant for long range characters. If a Sojourn's on an angle or a Widow's on an angle, this sort of lose-lose situation effect is lessened because a Sojourn in your backline isn't particularly dangerous, whereas like a Reaper or a Winston or a Genji in your backline is pretty dangerous. Another benefit of being on an angle is that being on an angle denies the enemy team access to the angle, or at least challenges their access. This is kind of more of a space control thing. So I'm not going to dig into it too much, because again, I talked about this in more detail before. But if you set up on an angle, if the enemy team wants to push that angle, well, you're there. You're going to blockade their progress. I'm going to still use the same example here with this angle on the right side with Wes. You'll see this angle is entirely uncontested by the enemy team. They have nobody here to defend it. And so, because I left it open, right, our team gets completely free access and control of that angle. We're able to push as far in as we want.
Flashpoint unlocked.
If they had set up here, though, they would have challenged us a little bit more. If the Cassidy went this way, the Honor would have never been able to get into the backline to begin with. Even if the Cassidy was never able to push all the way around, get other benefits, he would have at least gotten the benefit of preventing the on-run from taking that angle. I will add on to this, though. Sometimes the people who are on an angle, like, let's go back in time here, and let's
Flashpoint
pretend
unlocks in
that
10
there is a
seconds.
Brig and a Cassidy, both imposing the on-run here. On-run cannot beat a Brig and a Cassidy in a fight by herself. That's just not realistically going to happen. And so the on-run couldn't jump in here and dive on them and try to win the fight. That'd be quite silly. But what she could do is she could poke them and kind of drop back, but continue to pressure them. So even if she has to give a space, even if she can't fight them, she at least challenges them and makes them have to work for controlling that angle and slows them down a little bit. So if you're on an angle and there's other people there, and you know that like that's an unwinnable matchup for you, don't jump in there like throw your life away, but don't just run away either and give it up entirely, unless you like absolutely have to. Try and put as much pressure on them as you can while keeping yourself alive. Are there any questions about the benefits of angles yet? Go ahead. Okay. Oh, gotcha. All right. Then I think it will move on to picking angles. So when it comes to picking what angle to set up on, there are a few factors that go into that equation. The first and most important question is to ask yourself what ranges your character likes to play at. The angles that a Widow or a Genji is going to play are going to be entirely different. Um, a Widow might like to play right here and kind of like poke out like that. Great angle for a Widow. For a Genji or an Anran, this is too far. They might use here to get somewhere else, but this is too far. A Genji might want to go around here because this gets him close. And so the big thing to consider is what kind of angle is going to get me into my range? Am I going to be able to get close here if I want to be? Or am I going to be able to get a nice, effective, long range pressure from afar where I get good sight lines, but where the enemy team isn't so close to me that I'm going to be in danger if I want to be far away? The next thing to ask um, is where the rest of your team is. And the reason why this is important is you want to avoid stacking everyone in the same angle. So if you're on run here, you might think, well, this right side angle isn't great for me, which is probably why West went here, probably was thinking, I don't love right side for on run, but my whole rest of my team is left side. So somebody should probably contest this right side angle, and it might as well be me, I guess. Because it's important to not stack your entire team on one angle in most situations. Like I was saying earlier, in Overwatch 2, 5v5, it's pretty hard to control space without controlling angles. So someone has to control this right side angle. Even if it's not perfect for an on-run here, it's better that somebody's here, even if it's not the perfect solution. Um, However, keep in mind that you don't always have to like run away from your teammates and go where they aren't. If there's one person on an angle, it can be great to join them. You just don't want to join the whole team. So if this on-run's here, maybe me on Lucio, if I was like over here, I might decide, okay, I'm going to join on the right side. Great. Now we're using the buddy system. That's always nice. But if it was the on-run and the hazard and the Wu Yang, maybe I would decide on Lucio, okay, that angle's got enough people on it. I'm going to hang on the left side now because we need more help on the left side. So don't stack everyone on the same angle, but don't be afraid to reinforce other angles a little bit. Just don't overstack on one spot. The next thing to consider is to find an angle that's going to allow you to apply the most pressure while putting yourself in the least danger. I know this is a really complicated topic. Pretty much goes along with the risk versus reward lecture that we talked about before. Um, There's a lot of things that go into it, but there are ways that you can kind of simplify it. Um, Obviously, right? If you jump in right here, you have pretty high potential for reward theoretically. You could maybe headshot the Juno and kill her, but you're gonna die. So we're not really gonna consider stuff like that. Over here though, this gets you pretty close, gets you really good pressure, but you have cover, you have escape routes, so perhaps this is a good deep angle for a dive character like a Reaper or like a Genji. But there's some other factors that go into this that can simplify it for you a little bit. And one of those factors is high ground. So New Junk City, and not a good map to talk about high ground on. There isn't a whole lot of it here, but high ground can be a great way to increase your ability to apply pressure and mitigate the risk that you take. Right, if you're up on this high ground here as like a sojourn here, you can apply some good pressure down, but if you get pressured, you can drop back. Easy peasy, you're safe. Another thing that goes into um, that is distance. Talked about distance earlier, but it's still really important here, is that obviously the closer you are, the more risk you expose yourself to. For some characters, most characters really, the closer you are, the more reward you expose yourself to as well, but we're about finding the balance. So find the line that is right, where you're going to get the most reward, you can exert the most pressure, while not being so deep in that you're overextended as far as the distance goes. And then another being is that cover. If you're playing on an angle out entirely in the open, like here's pretty an open angle, not a lot of cover. You can find some, but they can kind of mitigate that cover pretty easily by just pushing it on you. So this increases the risk by playing out an area with little to no cover. Another thing to consider is what characters the enemy team is playing, and that's pretty big. So if you're playing an angle like this, unlike Genji here, right? This is a pretty safe angle usually, because generally speaking, you can just dash away and you're fine. This is safe. But if they have a Mizuki or if they have a Cassidy, this angle could be a lot more dangerous. Because if you get stunned with a chain or you get flashbanged, you might not be able to dash away, and you have no cover here and no high ground to use for protection. So you're just going to be stuck here right in the enemy team's face and they can just kill you very easily. So what characters the enemies are playing is going to change what angles are safe for you to pressure from and what angles are unsafe for you to pressure from. All right. Are there any questions about picking angles?
Nope.
All right. We'll move on to kind of the most important thing, what to do once you're on an angle. So the golden rule. There's one thing you guys take away. If you get dementia and you forget everything else I said, remember this at least. Commit to the angle. Deal with what is on your angle first and foremost, and don't get distracted by other things happening. So what I mean by this is avoid crossing over to other angles. So if you are on this right side angle here as on run, and if you see somebody hanging out on point, unless it's a golden opportunity, don't cross over to this other angle to go fight that. Deepen your angle. Fight what's here. Don't get distracted over here. If you see your Wu Yang getting dove in the back, don't cross all the way over here to deal with that. Stay on your angle. Commit to the angle. When you cross over to other angles, a few key issues happen. For one, there's time wasted. There's always time wasted when you do this. Even if it's a little bit, there always is time wasted because you have to traverse that space to get here. And during that time you're traversing, you're doing nothing. The slower of a character you are, the more punishing that is. If you're Winston, if you're Anran, it's not terribly punishing because you can do it pretty quick. If you're Cassidy, this takes a light year. Why did I say light year? That doesn't make sense. This takes a year to get over to here. It's so slow. So avoid doing it for that reason. But also, as might be kind of obvious, if you leave an angle, what does the enemy team get to do now?
Pursue from that angle.
Yep. Yeah, the enemy team's gonna say, "Oh, you gave that for free? Don't mind if I do." And they're gonna walk right in. They're gonna take that angle and push it themselves. Well, they might not, but they can now. They have the option to, and it's probably a good option. So avoid crossing other angles for that reason. But also, when you are in the angle, focus on helping your teammates on your angle or fighting the enemies on your angle. So if you're here, even if you decide, okay, well, fine, I won't run over here, but I'll still shoot some shots over back there to protect the Wu Yang. Unless there's literally nothing else to do on your angle, don't do that. Because even if you're standing here, if you're shooting this way, well, what if the Cassidy walks up here while you're not paying attention, and then he headshots you and flashbangs you and you die? You got to deal with what's on your angle first and foremost. Don't get distracted by other things happening on other angles unless it is either an absolute emergency or is a golden opportunity where, like, if you see a break on 1 HP on point, sure, jump the break. That's fine. But don't do it without really, really, really good reason, because what is here is almost always the most important thing in the world. If you're a support and you're on an angle, like say you're a Mercy pocketing a Pharah, on the right side, don't fly all the way across to the left to heal your Ana in the back line. If she dies, to be honest, she dies. Commit to your angle with your Pharah. Help your Pharah out. If the Ana was next to you, sure, you could help her out then because she's on the angle with you. But don't abandon your angle to help your teammates or to fight other enemies unless it's a golden opportunity or absolutely necessary. Another thing that I touched on earlier is if you're outgunned by the enemies, meaning like if they're just, you can't realistically win that fight with who you have on the angle, pressure them, but don't commit, right? You likely can't kill them, so trying to jump in and kill them is not realistic to give you results, but you shouldn't let them have the angle for free. That's what I was saying earlier. If it's like the Cassidy and the Brig both pushing through here, right? Anron probably can't win that fight, but she can make their life a little bit harder by shooting at them, poking while dropping back, and just don't let them walk through entirely for free. Make it cost them something. Next here, leaving the angle can be done, like I was saying earlier, if you are completely forced out of it or if a golden opportunity presents itself. So if the enemy team rushes at you super hard and you have no hope of doing anything to them, sure, just run away. Sometimes you have to. Or if a golden opportunity presents itself, like I said, if the Brig is 1 HP on point, sure, jump her. That's going to be more value than trying to pressure this angle. There is another way that you can leave an angle that is acceptable, but is different than what most people would think of, which is continually deepening the angle around the clock, or sorry, until you completely wrap around the clock. And we'll talk about deepening angles and the clock right now. So to start off with, I will define the clock. This is a nice concept to know. So you can think of Overwatch. This point is actually really convenient because it's a big circle. I didn't think about that, but that is actually perfect for this. So you can think of Overwatch positioning kind of like numbers on a clock, right? So right up here, we got 12. We got 6. I'm not going to draw every single number, but we got the numbers on the clock, right? If you're a number on the clock, you wouldn't put a number on the clock here because that's not where numbers on the clock go. You would put the numbers on the clock. No, here. That's where numbers on the clock go. And you should position like the numbers on the clock, meaning you should position on the edges of the fight. You want to avoid setting up in the middle of the fight here, because doing so exposes you to crossfire and such and doesn't really give you control of any angle. You want to always position on the edges of the clock. And when we get into the idea of deepening an angle, this is where the idea of the clock comes in. So the depth of an angle is essentially how wide the arc is between you and the rest of your team. So here, this Anaron's angle, we were to draw the line around the clock here, it would look something like that. That's the arc around the clock of where this Anaron is positioned. I drew this outer circle too wide, but don't worry about that. You can deepen your angle, though, by going further along the clock and going deeper, getting it somewhere like here. That is a much, much, much deeper angle because the arc is much, much, much wider. You go from being at like 9 o'clock and like 3 o'clock to like 9 o'clock and like 1 o'clock. That's a fair bit better. Um, and so what I was saying before was leaving an angle where this started. I'm just going to finish that point before I move on. Leaving an angle can be done by deepening the angle so much that you've wrapped around the clock entirely. So if you were to say, push through this right side, you keep on pushing through the right side, you commit to this angle all the way, all the way, all the way, all the way around. And now at this point, if you're all the way over here, I'll clear my drawings. If you got all the way over to here, where am I? You got all the way over to here, you're effectively in the same spot you'd be if you push the left side angle. But you got there by deepening on the right. Now, would I ever encourage somebody to do this specific thing in a real game? No. This is kind of silly, but there are examples where the idea of deepening all the way around an angle is applicable, just not necessarily on this point. On Ilios, well, it is done a lot, actually, especially if you push that coast side high ground. It's really common to deepen all the way around the clock that way. I just want to make sure, does everyone understand the idea of the clock?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, cool. It's a good concept to keep in mind, especially if you play dive characters. Very good concept. So we understand what the clock is. We understand how the depth of an angle goes. And so the next key point of what to do when you're on an angle is, when possible, deepen your angle. Like I said earlier, deepening the angle means widening the arc. So positioning further along the clock away from the rest of your team. By widening that arc, that's going to apply more pressure to their backline, for one. Right? The closer you are to the backline, obviously, the more pressure you're going to exert over them. Again, on most characters. Not always, but even if you're not closer to them, a deeper angle, even from afar, will actually still provide more pressure. Because the deeper your angle is, the stronger the nullifying effect of cover is. So what I mean by that is, if your angle is where the Honorant is right now, this Brig's cover is slightly nullified, but not much. If your angle as Honorant is right here, this Brig does not have a single piece of cover she can effectively use in the whole map, because the angle is so deep. It's like a complete 180 almost. So no matter where the Brig goes, she's going to get shot. She goes here, she gets shot by the rest of the team. She goes here, she gets shot by you. She goes here, she gets shot by you. She goes to point, she gets shot by you. So by deepening the angle, you increase the nullifying effect that angles have on the effectiveness of cover. Additionally, when you deepen an angle, right? So I said earlier, it increases your pressure onto the backline, but it kind of also increases the pressure on yourself, but doesn't have to always, but it sometimes does, because simply the closer you are to them, the more danger you're in, right? And generally speaking, deepening an angle does mean getting closer, but it doesn't always. Like I said earlier, going around here is also deepening your angle, but it's moving you farther away from them for pretty much the whole time until you're here where you are then very close. Again, don't ever do this, please. This is so silly to do this on this map. But as your general concept, you can do that and deepen an angle where you are not getting closer and you're not increasing your danger. A really good way of doing that is using high ground. High ground can be a great tool to deepen your angle while not increasing your danger, at least not increasing your danger too much, because that high ground will help mitigate some of the ability of the enemy team to pressure you back. Um, so yeah, deeper angle doesn't necessarily mean more danger, although it often does, but what it really means is just a wider arc. And don't overcommit unless you have a really good reason to. You can deepen your angle without jumping straight into them. That's not necessarily what that means. Just about widening the arc and increasing pressure. So any questions about what to do on angles? All right. The last thing I'll touch on is my favorite topic this month, communication. How do you make comms on angles? I talked about this stuff a bit in the communications lecture. I'm just gonna give everyone a little refresher right here. So huge thing, call out when you're going onto an angle. If you're on run here, call out, I'm going right side. Additionally, especially if you're a support, but just kind of in general, if you're joining somebody on an angle, be sure to call that out as well. Right? If I'm on Lucio here and I decide to join the Onron here, I should call out, I'm going right side with Onron. So that way the Onron knows, okay, cool, I have a Lucio. I can take some more risk now because I have a support with me. But also, if you are that support, be sure to say, if you're leaving Onron, I'm leaving you, or I'm leaving right side. Because the Onron shouldn't be thinking, I have a Lucio with me. I can jump this brig. And then she goes in, and then her Lucio's over here, and she's alone. Right? You have to be sure to tell people when you're leaving an angle. That is really important. Other thing is to call out what enemies are on the angle. So your team might not know. Say that there's a tracer in this room. You can call out tracer right side because the rest of your team over here would have no way of really knowing that. Additionally, along with that, is even if it's not generally your job as far as like what role you play, call out things like cooldowns or HP status um, with things that are happening on your angle, since the rest of your team most likely can't see it to call it out. So if the tracer over here uses her recall, even if say an Anron, well, that's not necessarily Anron's job. She should be doing target callouts, not necessarily cooldown tracking, but no one else is going to know the tracer used her recall. So Anron should say it because she's the one who can say it. Does that all make sense?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to jump ahead to a different fight. Just go to some random one here. And at convenience, it's right at the start of the one.
What's happening?
So we'll jump ahead a little bit.
Let's do it faster. Flashpoint
And let's
unlocks
see.
in 10 seconds.
Alrighty. Turn on spectator overlay. Okay. We're going to think about blue team here. So who on blue team is currently taking an angle?
Wes.
It was a trick question. The answer is technically everybody, but I will give you points for that. Yes, it is Wes. I would also say probably you as well here, Alessandro, because when anyone's on an angle, everyone else comes on an angle. Because an angle is about not playing the same position as the rest of your team. So if you are here, but somebody else is here, and somebody else is here, these are all different angles. Now, this position and this position, pretty similar. They might even converge into one spot, but right now we are kind of playing three different angles. However, yes, Wes is playing the most angly looking angle for sure. So, let's see. We can look from here. How deep is Wes's angle? Rate it on like a scale like 1 to 5, how deep you think it is. 5 being like as deep as possible, 1 being like barely an angle at all.
I'd say like maybe like a 2 or 2.5.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd agree with that.
because in like 2 seconds he could be back with the team.
Yeah. It's really not a very deep angle. It does, like, we could also draw angles a little bit differently than just the arc. We could draw it like so, that kind of way, right? These two different angles of attack are different, but not entirely different. So yeah, it's not the deepest angle in the world. And then I'll give it a little bit of time, because we will focus on Wes in this angle here. I'm gonna talk on some other angles too. I'm just gonna let the fight out a little bit longer. Okay. What is Wes doing right now?
Poking.
Yes, what's he doing with his feet? I'll watch it back from third person so you can see this idea a little bit better. All right.
Flashpoint unlocks in 10 seconds.
Is that a strafe?
Not exactly what we're talking about today that Wes is doing. He's deepening his angle right now.
Oh shit.
It's all right. He was here, fairly shallow, but he's going deeper. He's making that arc wider between his teammates. He's applying more pressure. He's deepening that angle. It's good. Now, at this point in time, we are definitely controlling other angles now too. We have this sort of angle here with the hazard, forgot the character's name. We have this kind of angle where the Wu Yang and the Sojourn and Lucio are playing. We have the on-run angle all the way over here. We got 3 different angles that are playing right now. The enemy team, how many angles are they playing?
Seemed like one.
Yeah, I would give them 2. I think they've got this angle and they've got this angle. Very shallow angles, very, very shallow angles, but they kind of got it. The Juno's sort of on an angle. That's just because she's kind of lagging behind. She's not going to be pushing this way anytime soon. Let's let the fight play out a little bit. So let's see
Flashpoint unlocked.
what's happening over here. Okay, it's getting kind of poked out a little bit.
Someone's sweating.
Ah, so right here, our Anran, she did not commit to the angle. She drops back into the middle of the team. But she could have potentially continued to deepen the angle here and keep on pressuring, using the cover and advancing it. That would have been the better answer. Because by deepening this angle, she gets access to the backline. And it's going to create that difficult lose-lose scenario like I was talking about, where the team chooses to keep going this way and leave the backline exposed to the on-run, or turn around and fight the on-run, but then let these guys push in and pressure them on the high ground. To create a nice lose-lose scenario, but by dropping back through here, we sacrifice our deepest and most powerful angle. Are playing back with the rest of the team. A little bit unfortunate. Oh, I lied. Thank you, Wes. Wes commits. All right. I guess just went back for healing. That's fine. And here you can see that Lucio joins the honor on this angle to reinforce it, right? So because we don't want everyone stacked here, we can spread out a little bit, get some different pressure, get some different angles. Our hazard is still taking a slightly different angle than the rest of the team. It's quite a shallow angle, but it is still an angle nonetheless, and that's fine. You don't always have to take the deepest angles in the world, especially as tank. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But hopefully we get on an angle fairly, especially now that we capped point. You can already see the effects of this angle here is going really well. We're getting a lot of pressure on the backline, so the Soj has to turn around to fight this. The Juno has to make a really hard choice. Do I save my Sojourn here, or do I try and help my team up here who's getting rushed down by everyone else? It's a tough call. Either way, someone has to die. But that wouldn't happen if we didn't push this angle. So this is great that we did that. And also, our team pressured this angle.
Alla till mig!
And now you'll kind of see that as the fight progressed, right, we pushed. Let me get out my pen here. We had the honor on the Lucio. They pushed in this way. The rest of the team pushed in through this way. But in the end, everyone kind of converges into the same sort of space right in here. And that is generally how fights are going to play out. When you're taking angles properly, both sides are going to push the angles until eventually they converge into one spot and they kind of fight there. Especially dive comps. And a really big thing to keep in mind that I should have written in my notes, but I guess I forgot about, is an important idea. I kind of hinted at it, I guess. But say we were playing on these 2 different angles here. We had this blue angle and this yellow angle. All right. I was saying earlier, the enemy has difficult choice to make. They can pick one to deal with or the other to deal with, but they can't choose both. And so what's really important to do is if you're the angle that gets pressured, right? I already talked about this earlier. Drop back, apply pressure to them, but don't overcommit, right? So if you're the yellow angle, you get pressure, you drop back. But if you're the blue angle and you see that yellow angle get pressured, you can't just hang out here and do nothing. You have to capitalize on the space that the enemy team is giving up by pressuring the yellow angle, and you have to deepen your angle and push in and punish that. And vice versa. If you're the yellow angle and they ignore you and they push in on blue team, well, you have to deepen your angle. You have to pressure them and punish them for that. That is super duper important. Like simple angle theory. It's just if you're the team that's getting pressured, drop back, give us space. If you're the team that's not getting pressured, push in, capitalize on it. And also, enemy teams can split their attention, of course. They could have some people fight here and some people fight here. They can play angles too. And it's just kind of a matter of resource allocation. If you send one person here and they send two people to deal with you, okay, you can't really do too much, but that should make it a 4v3 over here. Does that all make sense?
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right, great. I think that I am done yapping. We've seen some examples. I think everyone should have a good understanding of this. Any last questions from me before I wrap things up?
Nah, I
All right,
do.
well, in that case, feel free to end the recording.